Welcome to A Brief History of Conspiracy.
This week, Building 7.
Right, so please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It really does help us out.
Yeah, please do.
Right, so we've just got over Christmas and New Year.
Indeed.
We had a little bit of a break. We've had flu season. Someone's still suffering. He is 90% snot currently.
Second cold of the season, always fun.
7. So let's get sticking to it. This, for me, did it fall down because of the fires, or was there a demolition job? Easiest video I've done so far?
I think so.
Yeah, demolition.
Demolition.
So, done?
Yeah.
Beer?
Yeah, it's good pub.
In this episode, though, we're going to be talking about a couple of eyewitnesses. One that's actually left comments on one of our previous videos, who says he was there at the time. And we've got a couple of other eyewitnesses. We've got to talk about the NIST report. We're going to talk about potentially faked evidence on the NIST report. The Silverstein Pullet comments.
Yes.
We're going to go through it. And the one really thing at the end of the episode we're going to be talking about is how I think generally the NIST report kind of explains how they did it. But we'll get into that at the end.
Yeah, I might agree with you a little bit on that as well, yes.
So, the NIST report, basically. So, we'll go through the official version of events. Very similar, if you go back to our Twin Towers video on what they said happened there. These long floor struts, lots of nice office space.
Yep.
The fires happened, the steel twisted, they disconnected from, I'll get this right, girder on the floor 13, which is unlucky for some. Disconnected due to the warping of column 79. Column 79 was really the Achilles heel of this building. 5 stories collapsed, having this pancake effect. That weakened and then pulled down column.
Yeah.
This column 79. The internal structure then collapsed, was pulled down as that went down, and then the external structure fell in. You can see that from the pictures.
Yeah,
that is roughly what happened.
Well, you see the pinch in the middle, don't you? And then the floors drop.
You start to see the light coming through windows and things as it starts to go, and then they're pulling the building down around it. So that's the official thing. And then this building actually imploded. The towers there was an explosive force. So yeah, they're basically, my first problem with this, NIST report are basically saying that the same problem or the same design flaw is what caused this collapse. But, and I said in the Twin Towers video, I can kind of see that it's possible because it's a very different building. Obviously, it's over 100 stories. It's, well, there's a lot of weight coming down all of a sudden.
It is quite strange to have the exact
building
pancake theory collapse for a building that was only 50-something floors.
Yeah, I mean,
wasn't it,
this
building
building's
7?
nothing like as big. It's still pretty big, but it's nothing like as big.
Yeah. What the Twin Towers were over 100, weren't they?
100 floors.
Yeah.
So there's not the weight that we're talking about, is there? And
Not the same sort of weight above that the towers had. No, of course.
And obviously this thing then imploded, but they're saying that was from similar. So I do have a little bit of a problem with that. So the couple of the big reasons why people believe this was pulled.
Well, the first one is, how did 2 planes powderise 3 buildings? Apart from the Twin Towers, the only other building that has been destroyed from fire that hasn't had a plane impact is World Trade Centre 7.
Yep.
In the entire recorded history of the last
World Trade Centre 5
5,000 years
burned like crazy. I mean, there's pictures of that. It is. You know, you see lots of these hotels and things that have burned over time, and when they've got fireproofed steel, and they survive. Building 5 was a lot like that. You can just see the metal ridgework, but it's a much smaller building. It was only about 12 or 15 stories or something like that.
Yeah, that Madrid skyscraper. That what was it? I think it was a raging inferno, wasn't it? For
that was
over 24 hours, maybe even pushing 30, 36. Yet the steel frame structure was still there after it had destroyed the rest of the building.
We have small collapses, even though I did have a look at that budget. There you can see sections of that steel that have given way, but you know, it's squares, isn't it? Like boxes almost. One gives way, and the rest of the structure holds. I don't understand why with Building 7 there wasn't because the big problem was this was a large atrium by the area. There's a large atrium and then this penthouse.
Yes.
And the column that collapsed was basically supporting that. So because there's this large empty space with no support structure, so that's why that column went down.
Yeah.
So why didn't just that section collapse? Why did it then pull the entire building down?
And that's where I struggle to believe what we're told as well, because you could understand the pinch and then the middle falling through with the no support there, but why then would all of the exterior that then had support columns
just get dragged in with it?
Dragged in with
like
it.
It's got no strength. Like
It's got no structural strength at all. So it is slightly less believable.
Yeah. The only other time a building, a steel framed building that has been protected with fireproofing that I could find that has collapsed following a fire was actually a 21-story building, which is again not as big as this building, and it was following an earthquake, which again you can see completely that an earthquake would cause other damage that could then lead to the building.
Yeah, of course.
So,
Because
that was in 1985.
Slight argument for the planes crashing into the two towers though, and the vibration from the impact at 450 miles an hour.
Potentially, I don't think
is that as severe as a severe earthquake?
No,
probably
but
not.
It would cause damage.
But it could. Yeah. So okay.
And there was damage inflicted on Building 7 from the initial impact of the Twin Towers. Debris did fall and hit it, but the NIST report says that damage was superficial. It then didn't think. But this is what started the fires that are supposedly what then took the building down. Fires that even... Though, I mean, there were significant fires. You see a lot of these pictures from a lot of YouTube videos, and this is one picture of just these 2 or 3 little fires. You can see pictures from the other side where it's just smoke billowing out the entire building. So the fires were significant, but they were going out. I mean, even the NIST report says they were going out. So
well, you can see it as well. You just have to look at the colour of the smoke that's being emitted from
because it's very
from
black,
the buildings.
dark smoke.
Black, dark smoke, stifled fire, no oxygen.
Exactly.
So, you know, and in order to get fires really hot, you need a lot of oxygen.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about the blast furnace idea in the Twin Towers. Yeah. That's basically with a stream of oxygen coming in, of airflow of the wind through the building.
It's a very specific set of scenarios that have to work in the right place, isn't it? To get that sort of heat. But it's possible to get those heat. Generally speaking, a fire, what we're talking about here, was going to be the furnishings and things like this burning. You're looking at about 600 degrees centigrade at most. The other big thing was Larry Silverstein himself, the owner of this lovely building, on the phone to the fire chief. Sort of the quote is, and I will read the quote to you, "We've had such terrible loss of life, maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it." People have jumped on that and said that like this pull it is a demolition term,
which it is. If you look around the demolition industry, that's what that's the I suppose the abbreviated term for controlled demolition. Let's pull it, or we're ready to pull it.
There's a couple of things with this stuff for me. Would he know that term?
Possibly not. But it's not a difficult term to. I mean, I knew of the term before.
Yeah, maybe. But my thinking thing is that if he decided it's just as feasible to say that they were just talking about pulling the firemen out, and that seems just as likely to me.
Maybe. I think the reason they use the phrase "pull it" is because they're using the controlled demolition, and it does a classic. Normally, it pinches the middle of the building, and they blow out the supports underneath, so it then goes. It's like you're almost pulling the building from the centre point. It's like you've got a string, and you're pulling the building into an
like a blind
to implode in on its own footprint.
Yeah, which is what this building did again. Which is, I tell you what, if it did just come down from fire, it did it in a very controlled, sensible way. This building wanted to implode on itself. It's very nice. It's very lucky it did that because it could have killed several people.
Which does lead me to believe that it might be controlled. Either that, or it was one of the worst construction architectural designs for a building ever.
We kind of argued that in the first video as well, didn't we? That these seem to be very badly designed buildings potentially.
Maybe they are just covering their own arses for the poor design and build of these.
The interesting
buildings.
thing though about this Larry Silverstein comment, this pull it comment, is actually he said he was talking to the fire department commander. Who since came out and said no, he wasn't. I didn't speak to him. And he says he didn't speak to him on that day. And if you think about it, why would he? If you're in 9/11, you're the fire department commander, and the owner of one of the buildings phones you, you're going to go, tell him just sod off, I'm busy.
I don't think
I don't want to talk to you right now. I've got better things to do. And you know what, mate? I don't care if you're in the building or not. It's not your decision what I do with my firefighters. I will pull them out when it's safe. Do you know what I mean? Why would he be on the phone to Larry Silverstein? You know, so, but like I said, this guy said, which then, that makes it more suspicious to me, though, that Larry Silverstein's then come out and said this stuff.
And if you were using the phrase pull it, to mean pull the firefighters out. You wouldn't say pull it, you'd say pull them. It's
Yeah.
the wrong use of, the wrong grammatical use, isn't it? Or the wrong use of grammar.
Yeah, it's
in
maybe
the
what you
situation.
wouldn't say. Yeah, when he says pull it, he's talking about the building, isn't he?
Yes.
Rather than the people.
Yeah, otherwise you'd say pull those people out. Tremendous loss
Yeah.
of life, get them out. But
Yeah.
again, why would
Just get
Larry
'em out,
Silverstein be involved in that decision or that process in the slightest? It's the fire department's decision, surely.
Whether that's just him later trying to make out he's more important than he is,
Possibly.
or
Yeah.
there's something else going on and he was talking to somebody else. I don't know. They always say that if you tell a lie, make at least some of it true to make it more believable. So maybe it
was someone else he was talking to, not the fire chief.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they made the decision to pull it. What, you mean the people that had gone in and put all the explosives in, ready to pull it? Maybe that was the conversation he had with them.
And that's what he's then been talking about, and that's what is that, rapper line of truth. I don't know. I found a lot of videos and things saying that a lot of firefighters knew this building was coming down beforehand. They said they reckon they knew it was coming down for hours. They could see Boeing in the building. It was warping from the fires and things.
It didn't come down till 5 o'clock in the evening.
No, it burned for nearly 8 hours.
It burned for like most of the day before it collapsed. Which again is interesting because it gives enough time potentially for people to go in.
Which we'll talk about that in a minute, because I do there's an interesting point I want to make on that one. But I was going to say that we had a comment and somebody I was chatting to through Facebook on one of the videos, and he says he was actually there. Now I can't verify his story obviously, but I do know he's from the area, so I've got no reason to misbelieve him. And he did have really good details about how far they'd run and things like this. But he says that he was volunteering in the area. He was trying to help people out of the buildings and trying to help people that were injured. The firefighters basically told them, he said a few minutes before, but I don't know how literal he was being, and they basically said that nobody knew this building was coming down, and all of a sudden, just before it went, they were all told to run. And they said he ran 2 or 3 streets before, and then the building just collapsed behind him, basically. So these stories of that the firefighters knew this building was coming down for hours.
Conversely to that, the media did report, well, certain media reported its collapse prior to it happening that day.
The BBC had a little bit of a bad day from that respect. They, about half an hour before, I've loved the video, half an hour before, and we have to connect that one of the other buildings, Building 7, has collapsed, and then in the background there's like Building 7 just stood
in
there.
the New York skyline, still standing, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people consider that a smoking gun. They really do consider that a Now I initially, but you actually made a point earlier that maybe the information was sort of being drip fed out. I initially thought if they're sort of like reading a script, it makes no sense. If they're being sent the information, it would make no sense for whoever's planned this to do that, because you're just letting more people know that it's a lie, don't you? But actually, a lot of these media things are run off a line, don't they? There's like Reuters and things like this. They put the information out, and then the different newsrooms just pick that information up. So it might not even be that difficult for somebody centrally to be drip feeding this information out.
True, and with 90% of the Western media controlled by the six major players now, it's it's not that hard when they all go to the same meetings, like the Bilderberg group meetings, to coerce the media into printing your version of events and coordinating them. I think what's most likely to have happened that day is they were supposed to pull the building, or controlled, the building was supposed to have its controlled demolition probably 20 minutes, half an hour earlier than it actually occurred. So it's probably supposed to occur about 4:30, but didn't actually happen until 5 o'clock.
Yeah, quite possibly.
And because
that information was just released to the BBC
information had already been released, and then they decided to delay it.
I also think it's possible, and probably more likely in my head, that it was just a mistake. There was much going on.
But hold on, if the building wasn't going to collapse though, and you'd announced it had already collapsed and then it didn't collapse, where did you get that information from? Building 7 has some very interesting tenants as well. Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's built over a power substation. Yes. Which, if you're thinking about coordinating an attack and limiting your response, the World Trade Center was built over the water main that exploded before the planes hit somehow. limiting the ability for the fires to be controlled, particularly in Building 7. And then you've got the power substation, which was obviously then destroyed.
Was there any evidence of the power going before?
I don't know, man. I don't know about that.
Know.
But,
I haven't looked into that actually. It'd be interesting to know if the power was still, because if you had loads of trapped people in WTC 1, 2, and maybe 7, the last thing you want is them communicating with the outside world. So you'd want the power to go down as quickly as possible to stop communication with the outside world.
When this went down. But it's interesting to talk about Building 7 though, actually. When it was first constructed, it was considered to be a bit of a flop because they couldn't fill it. It was only when the Solomon Brothers, part of this investment bank, which has got shady links, but we'll get into that when we start doing the Follow the Money episodes a little later in the series.
Ties to AIG, perhaps?
There's a few ties that I've seen, but I'm still doing the research. But they're not. They seem slightly dodgy, but they took up a lot of the building before they moved in as tenants. The building was in danger of being like a financial flop. It just wasn't. They couldn't fill it.
Was that why the CIA housed their biggest headquarters outside of Langley, Virginia, in there as well? Then just to utilise
it was one of their
space.
biggest data dumps, wasn't it? I think, but
it's the second biggest CIA place outside of Langley, office. Virginia.
That's interesting. If you're also talking about trying to cripple your ability to respond and cripple intelligence on the day, one of the things you'd want to take out is the Office of Emergency Management for the mayor office in New York. Building 7.
Building 7.
So they all had to retreat to a different place, but this thing had been like reinforced and like bomb-proofed sort of thing.
Oh yeah. The windows could withstand 200 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, also it was designed to be. It was designed to be self-sufficient, had its own power source, its own thing.
Water supply, everything. Yeah. Which is interesting that would normally be the crisis management place that was destroyed. Thus, what's the word? Stopping you from having any real response in a timely manner.
And then the US Secret Service had offices there as well, which is again is another organisation that you would want to limit their ability to respond. So.
Oh, and the other thing that we've completely forgotten as well is the 2.3 trillion that went missing on September the 10th, 2001.
I say, I hadn't forgotten about it. We're not talking about it yet.
Yeah, all right, okay.
It's like he doesn't attend the meetings. Yeah, the 2.3 trillion. We're talking about that when we started talking about the money moving, and this is where all the research was for.
And the main computer system that kept records of all this money was in the outer D-ring of the Pentagon, which was hit on September the 11th, and the only backup was in WTC 7.
Yeah. So after September 11, this investigation into $2.3 trillion lost.
Missing from the Pentagon's Department of Defence's budget. Yeah.
We're going to be talking about something else. That hole may have been a little bit bigger since then, but we'll go into that another time.
Just an order of magnitude.
Yeah, it was about 10. So, if we talk about the 9/11 Truth Movement briefly, these 1,400 architects, engineers, things that have got together and said that what happened on September 11 doesn't make any sense. They are particularly adamant that Building 7 doesn't make sense.
And you've got to kind of listen to them when their field of specialism is architecture.
Yeah. Well, we talk about Richard Gage is one of the leaders. We're going to talk about him a bit when we talk about the NIST report and how it might have been tampered with. We've got a demo expert, Danny Jorkins. We've got a physicist, Sammy Jones. We've got a civil engineer, Professor Robert Carroll. He's a slightly interesting fellow, though. He basically got asked to leave his job after he came out and said a lot of things about September 11th and how he believed it was faked. He was a professor at a university, and they sort of said, you should probably retire. So he's an interesting fellow. Okay. But you've got this group. I've seen them in a few interviews, particularly Richard Gage is very good. And he's not really shouting conspiracy. He's not talking about who did it, why. He just says, from an engineering point of view, the story you're telling us doesn't make sense. And I just want an investigation.
It's not logical. It's not. Yeah.
And somebody that understands this stuff better than me, better than you, is saying this don't make sense. That's got to be a big flag. Particularly when the NIST report that we'll talk about in a bit was dodgy, and the Commission report doesn't even mention Building 7.
Yeah, but just it fails to acknowledge its existence, which is exactly what you do when you're running a cover-up. Generally,
Yeah. One thing I would like to talk about is another eyewitness on the day. It's a Barry Jennings.
And again, yes, I remember Barry. Yes,
really fascinating bloke. He reports there were several explosions. He is a firm believer in this building didn't fall down because of fire. He says he heard explosions. I would argue that wouldn't it sound like explosions though, that the two towers were coming down around him, the debris hitting the building.
I imagine there'd be some loud, high decibel sound from the collapse, but
he says several though as well. That's 3. He says several explosions. So I mean, he was talking about that he was saved. He was finally got out of the building about lunch, about 12 o'clock until he actually finally got out of the building. He was the last one in the building, so he should know. There's reports of him saying he was having to step over dead bodies. That I said there was these several explosions. He's got a very, very exciting story about how he got out of the building. That parts of the building were collapsing, and he was having to, go down to climb back up, and all sorts of things. I mean, and I've seen him in a few interviews. He seemed really convincing, and again, he wasn't necessarily saying anything. He was just saying what I witnessed doesn't fit what you're saying.
Yeah.
So.
And that, and if there's enough eyewitnesses that corroborate that, then it does make you start wondering as to what occurred.
And then in 2008 he died, and there's a little bit of mystery about how he died, but some have said it's possibly leukemia. And I don't know if you said, particularly if I was the family, that a lot of have suggested that he was killed because of what he was saying. One of the reasons they point to that is because the family haven't released why he died. But would they? A lot of families would just think that's none of your bloody business.
Well, also, he might have been a lone wolf in his beliefs within his family as well, so they might not really want to get involved in letting the public know what his cause of death was. That didn't matter to them because they didn't believe his conspiracy theory for 9/11. Why would it's just his family, isn't it? They just want to.
It's like we discussed in the last episode, isn't it, about cancer and 9/11, and unfortunately the asbestos in the air and all these other things. Somebody dying within 10 years following this incident of cancer shouldn't really shock us.
No, it probably shouldn't. You're probably right. If there's asbestos in the buildings and those fibres are getting pulled apart by the severe forces of the collapse, you're inhaling those straight into your lungs and lots of it. By the time you get clear of that dust field after the
most definitely
buildings have collapsed.
And I would like to defend him a little bit as well, actually, because he then retracted a part of his statement a few years later in another report, and he retracted the part about stepping over the dead bodies. So then a lot of debunking sites have jumped on that and said, well, he retracted his statement. He didn't. He retracted the bit about stepping over the dead bodies. And the reason why he did was because he didn't retract it because he said it's not true. He said it didn't like how it made me sound. And that's a direct quote. And I can kind of understand that. People sort of saying, well, why weren't you trying to help them? Why weren't you trying to see what was going on? And it made him sound like he'd done something wrong almost.
Yeah.
So,
although there was probably nothing he could do
in
that situation. If they were already dead, what could he do to help?
But the thing, he could have come out and said, oh, I was confused, and it was, the shock of the event, and maybe I was confused, but he didn't. He just sort of said, I don't like how it made me sound, which is different. He had every excuse under the sun to say, I might have been wrong about that.
I think selfishness plays very highly into a situation like that. You look after yourself and your loved ones that you're with. If you're on your own and your loved ones, your family are at home, it's number one.
But also, you're trying to get out of that situation. This fireman actually got him arm in arm, escorting him out of the building. So it's a bit different to sort of say, whoa, shouldn't we be doing? Let's say he's not in a position to sort of try to help anyone. He's the victim. He's the one being helped. So I think. But he's a very, like I say, it's really interesting the way he talks about it. And at the end of the day, somebody that was actually there, the last person to be dragged out of the building, is saying this ain't right, and that's huge. Well, the other thing is, I think we're going to have to look in the video on its own, to be honest. But a lot of eyewitnesses seemed to have then died. There's a couple of things that nobody disagrees about though, and one of them is this sulfidized steel thing. And they found evidence of this on during the Twin Towers, but they found a lot of it at Building 7.
So here's
Because
the
they
official
haven't
theory on
released
how
the
it all
recording.
happened.
How did you get to that answer?
Oh, I'm not telling you.
Not telling you. Yeah. Go on. No, don't want it. If that's true, and whoever knew it's true, then NIST are telling you how they did it.